Just to kind of kick it all off, something easy. How did you get into sport? How did you become an athlete? You know, you must have been a kid in school at some point and then just kind of, I don't know, lifted some weights, kicked a football, done something and gone that. You know, what was the thing that kind of got you into it professionally, and, you know, where did it all begin?
Well, I think first and foremost, I started playing rugby at the age of 5. And that was probably mainly due to my dad. He just, I think, decided that he wanted to get out of the house on a Sunday morning, right, and go and see his mates who also had kids of my age. So he took me down to Cambridge Rugby Club, which is the first rugby club I ever played for at the age of 5. Right. But I suppose I say that story in the backdrop of just always being around sport. As I say, my dad and my mum played sport, still play sport. My older brother as well. I think when you got an older sibling who also plays sport, you know, for me, my brother was always 3 years older than me. So I always try to emulate like kind of what he was doing. Right. He was more of a cricketer rather than I went in and ended up being more of a rugby player. But I think professionally, I always knew, I think probably from about going into, I say high school now, you can tell I've lived in the States. But really, it's kind of like, I had a vision really probably at the age of 14 and 15 where I was loving it and realizing things were going quite well around that time. And I sort of niched myself more towards rugby. I played all sports kind of up until that point. And then, I think it was the realization really at that point that this is what I wanted to do, was to play professional rugby. And I went on that journey and I guess in the end it worked out. It worked out.
Yeah. So what, you know, in terms of career highlights and things, because obviously we can talk about all the I kind of know your story already in terms of just I know how I got into music, and I know for sure that'll be something very similar as to what you did for sport. It will be just that kind of like different places, different people. But, you know, I think fundamentally it's got to be something to do with your passion, the people who influence you and things like that, of course. So what would you say then is kind of like, skipping out a couple of years and things, what would you say is a particular highlight of the career that you've had in sport, in particular, you know?
I think, you know, for anyone who's involved in professional sport, you always want to play at the highest level. And for me, I got that opportunity when I was selected to play for the USA International Rugby, which, you know, take away my accent, the US roots run in my family, my dad's side of the family, because my grandmother was born and raised in Los Angeles. And now, ironically enough, you know, I live an hour and a half south of where she was born and raised. In just outside San Diego. So it's kind of everything sort of rolled itself around, I think, from the family front to being fate as to where I am now. But I think, you know, highlights always a classic. You have time to reflect, and I'm having that time now. I've just retired, literally just retired. But I would say real highlights are playing for, I guess for me, it felt like my country. And, you know, I also played for England in the age groups as well. But I kind of became a bit of an adopted son for the US. And, you know, obviously a huge sense of pride for myself, but also for my family in particular. And going to the Rugby World Cup in 2019 was certainly, you know, got to be a highlight, which obviously we're coming to the 2023 World Cup, which unfortunately the USA are not qualified in. That's another story. Being involved in that, the biggest tournament, the biggest stage really that our sport can offer, in Japan as well, was something which I'll never forget. And it kind of, I remember being in the tunnel just before we were walking out to play in front of, you know, thousands of people in Kobe, Japan. It was actually USA against England, and it just felt so surreal. I was, you know, standing across in the tunnel from guys I knew pretty well, from playing with or just knowing, playing against, and playing, as I say, on the biggest stage. So there's plenty of brilliant times in the US shirt, but that's really got to stick, you know, up there in playing the World Cup. The biggest of them all.
That's huge, isn't it? That's like, you know, every boy's dream sort of, you know, that's incredible. It's really amazing. It's interesting to hear you talk. It sort of sounds like almost like it wouldn't be like a particular event or something, it would be sort of being part of a particular process in a time of your life, sort of thing, that is the highlight. It's that being part of something, of a key moment, a key part. Would you agree? You know, would you say that that's...
Yeah, I would definitely say. I think, again, and I'm slowly coming to these moments at the moment in terms of reflection. I think when you're in professional sport or music or arts or just any career, really, you're very driven about the next goal that you have. And for us, it was always at the weekend, you know, the next match.
Yeah.
That was always the next exam. And it was, you know, until you kind of come back from it, then you kind of look back. I was always worried, oh no, would I have loads of these regrets and whatever, and wishes that some things had gone better than others. And maybe I will, I don't know, you know, when the new season kicks off and I'm not playing in it, am I going to think, oh no, I wish I was still playing? But I think actually no, and I feel proud of my career, and actually it's kind of the people, and it's the memories that I have about those, not just the matches, but you know, where it was I went in the world and played, or as I say, just the relationships that I've built.
Yeah,
some of my best mates today in those teams, and you know, I think, particularly in rugby, it's a physical game. You put your body on the line. So there's definitely that amazing rapport that you have with your teammates. That's something I'm going to miss massively. Yeah. And something which I think for me personally, I hold as my greatest memories is the people along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think then that, you know, that sort of, you know, the dark art of collaborating with people, whether it's management or fellow teammates, or, you know, like in my case, I'd say bandmates and things, you know, that, you know, do you think that sense of collaborative, you know, sport is every bit as creative as the arts and things. Do you think that collaborative spirit is a part of your success as an athlete?
I think so. I mean, obviously, I'm speaking from being part of a team sport, so I can't obviously say, you know, the likes of a tennis player or an athletics track runner, which might be an individual sport. But even then, everyone's got their teams, you know, their coaches, their mentors, their management. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like, very much understand they still have their team. But I always, you know, I remember actually playing tennis when I was very young, and I enjoyed it, but I remember my mum was taking me, and they didn't force anything on me, but I quickly realized I wasn't a single man sport guy. I liked to be part of a team. There was something very much like, if you're all going towards the same goal, which is obviously to win a game or win a championship, there was something very, I don't know, just something that got my juices flowing more than anything else. And knowing that, again, in my sport, I didn't want to let my teammate down. Yeah. You know, literally, again, we talk about on a physical level, you want to put your body on the line for the guy next to you. I know there's always those cliches around rugby, but that's kind of what it was, and it obviously still is. So for me, team is everything. And I've no doubt in the business world or whatever world it might be, I think former professional athletes or professional, you know, artists and whatever, I think get that. You talked about your bandmates, talk about me and my team. Like we get that in a different level than maybe people in companies or big, large businesses. And I think they like tapping into, you know, those people. I mean, the military as well. That's another big one where just understanding teamwork to the max, really. Yeah. So you talk about putting your body on the line. What kind, you know, you must have, you know, going sort of back from a school kid, and then, you know, the age of 5 and all that stuff, and then, like, you know, really training and getting into it in a professional way and stuff. What kind of, you know, this is all to do with sort of mindset, isn't it? Like, you know, it's the discipline, it's the collaborative spirit. You know, what would you say you have any kind of personal tips, or, you know, anything that you specifically do, or anything that you've learned, you know, along the way that is, like, you know, your mindset towards that? I think, well, number one is, again, with our industry, yours as well, it's incredibly cutthroat. So the reality is that, unfortunately, those who maybe struggle on a mental capacity, performing under pressure, which is totally normal, because those are they're very, you know, abnormal things to be doing, really, in your life. But ultimately, you know, you've got to be able to do that. Otherwise, you don't make it, you don't succeed. And I would say, if I look at some of my contemporaries who've gone on and made far more out of their career and more money and more fame or more than I have ever done, the reality is they probably cope with the pressure and they cope with the big moments maybe better than I do. Right. That's just reality, and I'm happy to admit that now. I think that is the difference. At the end of the day, can I do the same as what one of these top players playing for England does? The answer is yes, but it's about the consistency, and it's about performing under that pressure. And I think a lot of it comes down to experience. I would say in the back end of my career, I was so much better handling nerves. You've got to go through it. I always believe, I think whatever you do is you've got to experience failure. You've got to experience downfall. You've got to experience a bit of embarrassment as well along the way, because that keeps you sharp. It's always that thing with this human being. It's either fight or flight, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, if you have the experience to go back on, you could say it as a negative experience, which you never wish for ever again. So that's why it makes you work hard. Or then there's experiences where you did deal with it, even though it might have been difficult, and you can go back to that and think, right, my process by controlling myself, how I'm breathing, how I'm, formulating a sort of visualization of my, I guess, process, as a kicking of the ball. That was massive for me in terms of you can have your physical practice, but also your mental practice of just, picturing yourself on the field. And I used to try and go, on the day of the game, before warm up or anything like that, walk onto the pitch and just stand in positions where I might take kicks.
Right.
And you're not doing anything, but you're trying just to visualize, what that feeling is going to be there. Because I think sport, and again, similar to your industry, it is a lot about feelings. Yeah. And that's what I mean about the experience. You've got to be able to feel your way, into things and get that feeling of, right, comfort. I'm comfortable. I put the practice in. And I'm comfortable in that situation. And I think a lot of that comes to practice. How do guys, when they're very young, deal with pressure? I think there's an element of not overthinking it. I think when you're young, you hopefully don't overthink. And then having good people around you. I think having good people who are the experienced help you out in those pressure situations.
Definitely. I totally agree. I mean, certainly in the music industry, there's so much pressure on the artists and things to perform and things, in different circumstances. But the feeling yourself when you walk out on on a field, a ground, a stage, a TV set, whatever it is, and there's lots and lots of people judging you and expecting some result of you, and it's an incredible feeling, but it's also something that comes with a tremendous weight and pressure and stuff. Has that element of it ever kind of hurt you in some way, or is that element of it been like, this is too much for me, or been too much to handle?
I think so. I think you have to be open and honest about these things. And again, I can look back now. I've literally just retired, and I probably can pick out maybe a couple of occasions in my early part of my career where I probably just built something up more than it was. Right. I think that's the reality. It's sport. At the end of the day, it's sport. Or at the end of the day, it's music. So why did you do this in the first place? It's like you wanted to enjoy it. And maybe there's an element, particularly in sport nowadays, again, going back to how cutthroat it is, where the enjoyment is drawn out and you're drilled in about the process, or more importantly, you're drilled in about the result. You're drilled in about the win. And I think that is ultimately important as a business. But at the same time, maybe back when I was young, in those couple of occasions and some, maybe bigger games, I didn't necessarily fall apart, but I just didn't have that right attitude. I was more fearful rather than excited. And, that would always be my kind of lesson to someone coming through now is understand you're going to have fear. There's no point blanking that, because that's the other problem. Oh no, I don't want to be nervous. It's like, that's stupid. There's no point doing that. You're wasting energy.
You are nervous. So
and actually embrace it to a degree in terms of actually that is a bit of excitement. I'm alert. I'm ready. That's what I want to be in the game. Those things never really got taught to me. I think that maybe that can be better for young people. In understanding your feelings and emotions, but also accepting them as well. Realizing that, particularly with sport, like it's such a fickle industry. One week you're the hero, the next week you might unfortunately just be the person who's mucked it all up. And I've been there on both sides. So like it's tough one to take. You've got to be resilient. I think that's the biggest thing as well. You've got to be resilient. Interesting.
I wanted to touch on the sort of the social media / media side of things just a little bit. And I appreciate if you can't talk about certain things a bit, or whatever. But to what extent, just to get into it, to what extent do you think social media plays a big part of a person's career? I don't even mean just an athlete. I mean like a person, to what extent has it influenced you or helped you or hindered or...
I'm always a believer that it's helped. I mean, right. I kind of feel that in the day and age that we live in, social media is so important to your brand or ultimately to just selling yourself. I think one of the issues which is with my sport, rugby, is we don't have, it's a very traditional sport. And therefore the idea of someone being more of a character or being, in front of the camera speaking their mind, was always looked down upon, and I don't think that's, in my opinion, necessarily a good thing.
Yeah,
I have a lot of experience with the American market. Again, living there as well in California, is you look at these American sports and they love individual characters coming out. You hear about them in the NFL, and look, some of them are a little bit crazy. I'm not going to say they're all brilliant. But I do feel like there is that element of just being yourself. I think social media allows that. And then it allows you to just recognize someone as not just, for example, Will Hooley, the rugby player, but also what I am, what kind of person I am and the interests that you have outside of the sport. I look at social media for me personally. I've always wanted to get involved in the media, and that may not necessarily just be in front of camera or the writing that I do, but also just genuinely, getting out there and getting experience. And social media has been my kind of free advertisement, tool. I had a podcast. I've done writing blogs. I've done all those things, and I'm convinced now, and I'm happy to say that I've already transitioned out of professional sport into my next career, which is involved in the media out in America. I can't be too specific about it just yet,
fair enough,
just for visa reasons. But look, and I'm proud of myself. It's one of my biggest things. I said I wanted to make the decision on my terms when I wanted to retire, which is around the age of 30, and done what I've done. Could do more, but I want to go into this next career, and that for me was a drive that I use social media to try and gain my profile, my experience, my publicity. And I'm on a tiny level compared to some of these big names, but it's massively helped me. I've no doubt, in my opinion, if you use it right, social media can be a great tool to engage with fans. I think it can be a great tool to express yourself and be a character and be your own person and make yourself, a human being. If you want to put yourself out there, if you do, not everyone will.
Yeah, of course. Are you across, all social platforms? Are you on everything, or would you recommend like keeping it focused, or what do you think?
I have not branched myself out to something like TikTok yet.
You're not doing the dances. You're not doing.
No, I'm not doing. Although you know what, I always thought TikTok was this dancing thing, whatever. But then I quickly realised actually, no, it's not just that. And maybe I've been a bit slow to recognize it's more. I've always been someone, Twitter. I use Twitter as like kind of my news, getting up to date with, I try and follow people of interest to me, friends and whatever, but also, not just people would think one this way, but people also think the other way. I think that's always so important to expand your knowledge. But no, I probably need to do a bit more of the expressing.
A few more dances. That's what. I
don't know about that, Ben. I don't know about that, but yeah, Instagram and I tell you the other one, which is, it's going to sound maybe boring to some people, maybe the younger generation out there, but get yourselves on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I realise, is just an incredible tool to connect with people out there, and the people that I've connected with. I remember always being told when I was younger as a rugby player from someone I played with, He said, you're relevant now as a rugby player, but when you don't become a rugby player anymore, you become very irrelevant to a lot of people. Therefore, put the effort in now to go and speak to people, go and introduce yourself. And I like to think LinkedIn was a great way of doing that.
Interesting.
Virtually, especially when we went through the pandemic or were coming out of the pandemic, people want to connect on these sort of social media platforms.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's been a massive help for me for sure.
Do you have any kind of you've got a certain platform and that engages a certain audience type, if you like. Do you have any kind of tips and tricks for, so for example, young footballers, young rugby players, tennis players, or likewise musicians and whatever, actors, all that stuff, everyone is trying to do that thing of how do you get your social media accounts to Will Hooley's level or something? Did you have a strategy or an idea of how you did that specifically, or was it just a kind of luck of the draw? And I don't know, you tell me what you...
No, I mean, I've never been someone, and I'm unfortunately my social media accounts are not in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. So I've never been sort of like searching for followers or anything like that. So unfortunately, I'm probably not the right person to comment on. But what I would say is, when I think about, especially writing, recently I just brought out a piece in The Guardian or The Observer. And if you don't put yourself out there, then how are you even going to know whether you are going to increase your following or readership or viewership? I think one of the hardest things to begin with, is for people to put themselves out there. I'll never forget, I got some great advice by a journalist, still a friend today, a guy called Sam Roberts. And he said back years ago, he said, Will, whatever writing you do, create your own website and just put it there. Like whether you write for a magazine, a newspaper, or a blog, try and keep writing because it's a skill. So it's like anything. Try and keep making music, try and keep whatever, because it is a skill. Mm-hmm. And then, have it somewhere where you can show people as like a CV. Yeah. But then more importantly, I talked about the relevant thing is how can you be relevant to what you're doing? So if I'm talking about the Rugby World Cup at the moment, I'm in a privileged position. I've been to a Rugby World Cup. So if I'm going to write about it, I'm going to try and use my experience to draw something a bit niche that makes me relevant. And I definitely feel that a lot of those first barriers in terms of people trying to, try and do a blog, try and do a podcast is one, start it and just put yourself out there. You'd never know where it led. And actually for me, that website, which is not a big website at all, I don't use it even that much, but it led to me getting a freelance job with The Guardian during the 2019 World Cup. I Amazing. Got approached, and look, I'm a small, tiny scale. People have done this on a way bigger scale than me. But I'm convinced, I like to think whatever opportunities I have done or have achieved or got, whatever you want to phrase it, have actually been kind of from just putting myself out there a bit and not being embarrassed, providing you're obviously PG in what you're saying.
I think that's great advice, mate. I mean, like I sort of teach students and things the very same thing all the time. Just, you won't know anything until you start, and you can theorize about it all day long in a classroom or in this house or in a rehearsal room or anything, but until you actually just go out there and do the gig, do the thing, it's like you just don't know. You don't know what to explore or how best to do it or anything. Interesting.
I think also as well, just what I said before about experience. How are you going to gain experience, whether it's good or bad, from kind of sitting there or standing there, not willing to put yourself out? You have to learn through experience.
I get the impression from you, Will, that it's, you're a guy who's really sort of, you've cracked it in terms of, I've met a lot of, there's a lot of like mega celebrities. There's a lot of minor celebrities. There's people who are trying to make it, people who haven't made it, and there's in that big jumble of kind of career and striving to get to the career and stuff. There's a lot of kind of, confusion, and in terms of like the egotism and the way the career thing can start to just become the only focus and can be like, I'll just abandon my family, my life, my health, my everything, and, you know, and sacrifice it all for the career. And I've seen people, and I've helped a lot of people through that, where they've come out the other side of it, and it's been a bit of a messy situation for them. To what extent do you agree or disagree that, you know, taking care of yourself along this journey is a priority?
I mean, it's the priority. You know, if you're not looking after yourself, then who do you expect to look after you? You know, anyone. Yeah, you are in control of that. I think a lot of it, to a degree. And I've been fortunate as an athlete. You know, when it comes to physical health, I have been paid to look after myself.
Sure.
I'm finding it even now, and I played my last rugby game mid-July, and even now I had a period of going to events and meeting people and sharing beers, and people want to, you know, speak and whatever, which is amazing, lovely. But after a month or so of that unhealthiness, you know, was making me feel not great and making you mentally not great. So I think you have just got to be aware. And I'm massive behind mental health. I'm proudly an ambassador for Loose Heads, which is a mental health awareness charity in rugby. And I think you've got to, you know, just be accepting to help yourself. There's nothing wrong with going out and getting help, but also, you know, understanding what makes you tick. For me, doing some exercise in the morning, I feel so much better going into the day. It can be something small like that. And I do think, you know, having good people around me, I'm very lucky. I've got brilliant people around me, my wife, my family, my friends. So, you know, I'm in a fortunate position, but yeah, you've got to look after yourself for sure.
Yeah. Will, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And it's so good to see you again, mate.